Look at your reflection in the mirror and ask yourself who you are truly trying to impress today. We spend our entire lives trapped inside our own minds, experiencing every quiet joy and every sharp pain firsthand, yet we constantly look outward to figure out what we are actually worth. It is a strange, unsettling paradox that completely defines the modern human condition. You might feel perfectly content in a quiet moment, completely at peace with who you are and what you have accomplished in your private life. But the very second you step out into the world, that inner peace is violently shattered by a desperate need to be noticed, validated, and applauded by people you do not even deeply care about. Why is our internal compass so easily overridden by the chaotic, meaningless noise of the crowd? We willingly sacrifice our authentic desires, our quiet confidence, and sometimes even our core moral boundaries, just to secure a fleeting nod of approval from a complete stranger. This silent, daily surrender pulls us further and further away from our true selves. It leaves us wandering through life, wondering why we feel so entirely empty despite doing everything society tells us we should do to be successful. We are constantly trading pieces of our own soul for a currency that holds absolutely no real value. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius recognized this exact same fatal flaw in human nature. He wrote, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." When you truly pause and dissect those words, the profound absurdity of our behavior becomes impossible to ignore. By instinct and by the undeniable laws of nature, self-preservation dictates that we love ourselves deeply, fiercely, and above anyone else. If you are hungry, your first agonizing thought is to feed yourself. If you find yourself in physical danger, your immediate biological reflex is to ensure your own survival at all costs. You are the absolute center of your own universe, the lead character in the ongoing story of your life, and the only person whose experiences you will ever intimately understand. Yet, despite this deeply ingrained biological self-love, we voluntarily hand over the gavel of ultimate judgment to the outside world. We treat our own private opinion of our character, our worth, and our personal success as if it is somehow biased, flawed, or entirely invalid. Instead, we place supreme, unquestioned value on the fleeting, uneducated, and often completely arbitrary opinions of others. Imagine taking years to build a magnificent house, carefully choosing every single brick, perfectly designing every room to suit your exact needs, and finding deep satisfaction in the warmth it provides. Then, imagine letting a random passerby on the street tell you the house is completely worthless simply because they do not personally like the color of the front door. That is precisely what we do with our self-esteem on a daily basis. We allow external, uninformed audiences to entirely dictate our internal value and rewrite our self-worth. Marcus Aurelius saw this happening in the grand, marble halls of ancient power, where wealthy politicians and aristocrats traded their personal integrity for cheap public applause. They lived their lives as anxious actors on a stage, terrified of a poor review from an audience they secretly despised. Today, this psychological phenomenon has only multiplied in its intensity, creating a society of individuals who are utterly disconnected from their own core values. We dress for the approval of others, we speak to appease the fragile opinions of others, and we even alter our life's deepest dreams just to impress others. The psychology behind this behavior reveals a deep-seated emotional vulnerability and a severely fractured human ego. We simply do not trust ourselves enough to be the sole, confident authors of our own identity. We constantly crave a mirror reflection from society to prove that we exist, that we are important, and that we actually matter in the grand scheme of things. But when you constantly rely on society to act as your mirror, You are essentially looking into a funhouse glass that heavily distorts your reality based on shifting cultural trends and momentary whims. By exploring exactly why we willingly betray our own judgment, we uncover the precise mechanics of the attention seeker. This continuous, exhausting exchange of our authentic self for external validation is exactly why we trade our soul for approval. The title of our discussion captures this devastating transaction perfectly. We have foolishly traded the incredibly solid, peaceful foundation of internal self-respect for the incredibly fragile, anxious illusion of public applause. And the terrifying truth is that the very moment that applause stops, we are left standing on a cold stage with absolutely no idea who we really are. To deeply understand this relentless, aching hunger for attention, we must look back at the ancient origins of our psychological wiring. Thousands of years ago, human survival depended entirely and exclusively on remaining a valued part of the local tribe. If you were cast out, rejected, or simply ignored by your community, it was not just a passing social embarrassment, it was a literal death sentence. Your primitive brain evolved to treat social approval not as a fun, optional luxury, but as a highly critical matter of life and death. When someone smiles at you, agrees with your opinions, or publicly compliments your work, your brain instantly releases a massive, intoxicating surge of dopamine. This highly addictive chemical response is specifically designed to reward you for safely securing your place within the protective hierarchy of the group. Conversely, the agonizing feeling of being overlooked or harshly criticized triggers the exact same neural pathways in your brain as severe physical pain. But we no longer live in small, intimate tribes where our physical survival hinges on the collective hunting and gathering of 50 people. We now live in sprawling, hyper-connected, yet emotionally barren societies where our basic physical needs are mostly met without the need for constant social validation. Yet, our ancient brains are still frantically scanning the horizon every single minute for terrifying signs of social rejection. This massive evolutionary mismatch creates a perpetual, exhausting state of low-grade emotional anxiety. We are completely terrified of being invisible because our primitive subconscious mind directly equates invisibility with absolute extinction. Therefore, the chronic attention seeker is not necessarily a hopeless narcissist or a terrible, manipulative villain. They are often just a deeply frightened, highly insecure individual running on an outdated biological survival program that they do not even consciously understand. The modern world has expertly weaponized this ancient biological vulnerability in ways that are both highly subtle and completely devastating. We are now constantly connected to a massive, unforgiving global audience, providing an infinite and unquenchable supply of potential judgment right at our fingertips. Every single human interaction has been meticulously quantified into cold, numerical metrics of approval that we carry around in our pockets. When you share a deeply personal piece of yourself with the world and it is instantly met with deafening silence, the psychological sting is immediate, sharp, and profoundly damaging. To actively avoid that recurring pain, we subconsciously begin to carefully curate our entire lives, aggressively shaving off our rough edges and desperately hiding our unpolished truths. We obsessively study what gets rewarded by the digital crowd, and we slowly mold ourselves into those exact, socially acceptable shapes. We slowly chip away at our authentic identity until there is absolutely nothing genuine left beneath the shiny surface. Are you actually living a rich, fulfilling life, or are you simply performing one for an invisible audience? This is exactly where the true, tragic cost of trading our soul for approval begins to violently unfold. You slowly start to perform your daily existence rather than actually living and breathing it. The quiet, undocumented moments of private joy that used to deeply sustain your spirit suddenly feel entirely inadequate unless they are witnessed and validated by an external audience. You might find yourself standing at a breathtakingly beautiful location, surrounded by the majestic wonders of the natural world. But instead of quietly absorbing the awe of the magnificent scenery, your mind is entirely consumed by how you can brilliantly capture it to impress people sitting hundreds of miles away. The profound human experience itself quickly becomes entirely secondary to the public perception of that experience. In this relentless, exhausting pursuit of being constantly noticed, we completely forget how to simply exist in the present moment. We systematically transform ourselves into hollow, empty shells, beautifully and meticulously painted on the outside, but entirely vacant and echoing on the inside. Trading your authentic soul for public approval is a highly dangerous transaction that will absolutely always leave you emotionally bankrupt in the bitter end. The fickle approval of others is an inherently unstable currency, fluctuating wildly based on random circumstances entirely outside of your personal control. When you actively tether your core self-worth to something so incredibly volatile, your internal emotional state becomes a terrifying, inescapable roller coaster. Your baseline happiness becomes entirely dictated by the completely unpredictable moods, trends, and superficial opinions of strangers who do not truly care about you. One day you are highly celebrated as a genius, and the very next day you are entirely forgotten and discarded. This dramatic instability leaves you feeling constantly desperate, forcing you to perform increasingly exhausting and degrading acts just to regain a tiny sliver of that fleeting spotlight. This endless, spinning psychological cycle inevitably breeds a profound, suffocating sense of deep inner loneliness. Even when you are completely surrounded by people who openly claim to admire you, you know deep down in your bones that they do not actually admire the real you. They only admire the carefully constructed, highly edited, and thoroughly sanitized character you have artificially presented to them. Because you have successfully hidden your true self away behind a mask of conformity, your true self remains entirely unseen, deeply unloved, and desperately isolated. The supreme, painful irony of the attention seeker is that the more attention you successfully gather for your false persona, the more profoundly lonely your actual soul becomes. You eventually wake up to realize that you are completely trapped in a psychological prison of your own careful making. You live in constant, paralyzing fear that if you ever drop the exhausting act and show your real face, the roaring applause will instantly stop. You become absolutely terrified that without the constant validation of the audience, you will be left with absolutely nothing of substance or value. Breaking free from this devastating, soul-crushing cycle requires a radical, uncompromising shift in exactly how you process your internal validation. You must aggressively return to the profound, timeless wisdom offered by those ancient philosophers and finally recognize the absolute absurdity of valuing external opinions over your own. It strictly begins with the incredibly quiet, often highly uncomfortable daily work of sitting entirely alone with yourself. You must slowly discover what you actually value, what you truly love, and who you genuinely are when absolutely nobody is watching your actions. You have to aggressively learn how to become your own primary audience, clapping for your own silent victories. When you do something exceptionally well, you must consciously practice giving yourself the full, unadulterated permission to feel proud, without needing anyone else to co-sign or validate that pride. It means deeply accepting that true, raw authenticity will naturally alienate certain people, and becoming entirely at peace with that inevitable, beautiful fact. The harsh, undeniable truth is that the people who require you to fundamentally trade your soul for a seat at their table are never the people truly worth sitting with. By slowly, intentionally reclaiming the ultimate authority over your own self-worth, the desperate, chaotic noise of the demanding crowd finally begins to fade into the quiet background. You suddenly realize that the only genuine approval that has ever truly mattered, and the only approval that can ever bring you deep, lasting peace is your own. You finally stop frantically seeking attention from a broken world, and you start quietly seeking internal alignment with your own values. And in that beautiful, steadfast alignment, you finally discover the absolute freedom to live a life that is entirely, unapologetically, and authentically yours.